My name is Taryn, and thank you so much for stopping by my channel, Nicole Flower House. 1 year ago, I set out to build an amazing raised bed cut flower garden so I could learn how to create sustainable floral designs using my own homegrown blooms. The first thing I want to start with this week is my new plans for my roses. I took out my diagrams and went back to the drawing board, and I decided I wanted to turn the garden boxes that have roses in them into perennial garden beds. So instead of having one rose in the corner and annuals in the rest of the bed, I'm going to add 2 more roses to each of these boxes. That's going to give me a total of 12 roses. I already have 4 roses, so I'll be ordering 8 more. It's so much fun to pick these out. It's pretty hard to narrow it down because I pretty much want everything, but I love adding to my collection of David Austin roses, and here are my selections. Next up, I want to show you some new plants that I just got. These are called Berry Proud Coral Berry, and I saw these on Garden Answer, and my original love of berries started with plants called winterberry, which I also saw in the same place from Laura. And so you may have not even noticed these plants throughout the garden boxes, but they've been here all along, just haven't really talked about them. They kind of accidentally got buried by a bunch of annuals. And once these plants get big, I won't be able to plant annual with them anymore, which is fine. But here is a smaller one that I got online. And next to that, I have another bigger one that I got at a local nursery. The foliage on this one on the top is looking pretty sad, but it does have some healthier growth down at the bottom. So I'm hoping this winter, when I prune this back a little bit, that in the spring it'll come up with nice, healthy new growth and be fine. Now this particular plant, the Apollo version, is a male version. You do need a pollinator to get berries. And then finally, here's another female plant, very small, another online order that hopefully will start growing up nice and big. So that's where my berry obsession started. So these are coral berries, and they'll produce pink berries instead of red ones. So I'm thinking this spot here in the front of the house will be a good place to put these. Now don't mind our Halloween decorations in here, but I haven't really talked about this bed too much. I have some garlic planted in here. This is lavender that I started from seed. It's quite a bit bigger than some lavender you'll see later on, and that's because I got it into the ground out of their seedling trays about 3 months before the other ones. Along the back, I have some PG hydrangeas that I'm hoping will look like this when they grow up and mature in a few years. Now behind the Berry Proud plants, right along the pathway there, the brick pathway, I do want to plant some foxglove. So those are the seeds that you just saw. So that's another project I'll be starting at some point. This garden bed up here is another potential location for the Berry Proud plants, and it's currently overrun with annuals. I've said in a previous video that I'm turning this from an annual garden bed into a perennial garden bed. This little boxwood is currently buried by zinnias along with this lavender transplant. So once the annuals are cleared out, they'll have more room to grow as well. Here are the lavender plants that I grew from seed that I mentioned earlier, and again they're much smaller because they stayed in their seedling trays about 3 months longer than the other ones, but all the seeds were started at the same time. This is just a quick update on the willow I'm growing that I want to use for making wreaths and garden structures. I took some cuttings and have rooted them in water so I can propagate them and get a few more. Here is a mum branch that I'm going to propagate in water as well. I do have a few ivy plants here that I want to use for foliage in my cut arrangements. And ivy is an invasive plant, so I do have them in pots, and that's where they will stay. I haven't shown the Subpod in a while. This is my vermicompost system. It's doing really well. It's coming along. It's where we recycle all of our food scraps into compost. And when I was digging in these new bare root strawberries in this bed, I found plenty of worms roaming around, very happy. The Subpod is unique in that the worms can exit the system and live in the garden beds, and then they just enter the system to eat. Here are some leftover bare root strawberries, and they're extremely thirsty, along with some ferns. I have some hydrangea down here and more 9-bark. This area up here in the front, I'm going to be planting some Rosy Clouds daffodils. And also, I mentioned in my previous video that I might transplant my eucalyptus, and it is time to do that now. I was going to wait, but the rain we've gotten and the cooler weather has caused those to get much bigger in just the span of a week. So once the temperatures drop and it's winter and they're dormant, I will move those to the front there along the gate so they have a lot more space. Because technically eucalyptus are trees, they are perennials. So hopefully if I put some frost cloth on them, they will survive our winter. Now the poppy seedlings you see here did well, but I had spotty germination, so I'm going to throw a few more seed packets in there. And the rest of this is just updates on the other seedlings that I've planted. On the end here I have Persian cress, which doesn't really look like this, so I'm thinking these greens will need to send up flower stalks before it looks like what I'm expecting. I've never grown it before, so we'll have to see. The carnations I planted had the worst germination out of all, so I'll go back to planting those inside. The veggie seedlings are growing much faster than all the flowers, so I just wanted to show you that for comparison. These mums have just exploded in the past couple of weeks. I'm putting a picture up on the screen of what these looked like in December of last year in their pots, and they looked so pathetic and sad. But once I transplanted them into this garden bed, they really took off. And judging from that picture, I'm going to guess that the variety is Coral Charm. I'm not 100% sure, but I know this is a variety that I had bought, so I'm thinking that's the one. you may have noticed in that dahlia footage that I did start the new build of the dahlia patch. Here's a quick before and just a little bit of progress photos, but I don't want to show you too much because I want to do a whole separate video on the dahlia patch build. This little pumpkin, unfortunately, I cut from the vine when I was doing the project. I thought it was the only one I had, but luckily I found one more. I don't know if it's going to mature in time. It's still very green, but we'll have to see. Lastly, I did start my dahlia cutting project. As I've said in previous videos, I'm not digging up my dahlias this year. I'm hoping that most of them come back and survive our winter. But I'm doing these cuttings as kind of a backup plan. The way I did these cuttings is different than most people, so I'll show you how it works if I get a good success rate. I don't want to spread misinformation, so I'm going to see how these little guys do before I give you too many details. And these dahlia seeds here, of course, are my backup plan to the backup plan in case the cuttings don't work. Then I will plant seeds because I did not buy any tubers this fall. I might be able to get some in the spring, but probably not the specific varieties that I want. So we're just gonna go with the flow this year. Hopefully the tubers will survive. If they don't, hopefully some of my cuttings will survive. And if they don't, we'll use the seeds as a backup. Well, that is all for today's garden update. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, give it a thumbs up, and the best way you can support my channel is to subscribe and share it with your flower-loving friends. Thank you so much for taking interest in my cut flower garden, and I'll see you next week. Bye!